Denafrips RS-15, that's what we are talking about today. It's an R2R DAC that is 2 generations apart from RS2 that I reviewed several years ago when I was just starting my channel, and I used that DAC for I think longer than a year probably because I really liked it at that time, but it was not perfect. Well, no DACs. But 15th is here. As I said, 2 generations apart, it's significantly improved in several aspects. If you're a tech geek, you can look pictures of its inside and you can see that there are some new stuff happening there, like redesigned power supply and new higher precision oscillators for signal clock. And some other things are redesigned, improved, but basically it's the same R2R idea. And it should be the same Denafrips sound that we came to know and a lot of us like actually. But just before we talk about that sound, few things that I've noticed about RS-15 is that it's built better now. Now, if you remember, RS2 had this front aluminum plate that was thick, but the rest of the body was just metal sheet bent over it, and it was a bit hollow when you knock at it. The RS-15 is made completely of thick aluminum plates. It feels heavier, heftier, just more premium. And when it comes to features and functions, this is a DAC, a standalone DAC. It doesn't have volume control. It cannot act as a preamp or digital streamer or anything like that. It's a DAC with fixed level outputs, and you can use either XLRs, which are balanced, or RCAs, which are not balanced, single-ended outputs. When it comes to inputs, it basically covers everything. There's USB, I2S, optical and coaxial. And if you think something's missing, you're spoiled. Then in the front we have an array of buttons and also arrays of LEDs. And you can select inputs, you can shift phase, mute it, or select OS or NOS modes. There are 2 oversampling modes that you can choose between and 1 non-oversampling NOS mode. We'll talk about differences in their sound a bit later. For now, I wanted to tell you that this is a modern DAC. So basically, it supports really high sample rates and bit rates, especially on the USB input. Sample rates goes up to 1.5 megahertz and DSD 124. By the way, given that this is our R2R DAC, we have a multi-bit side for PCM, it's 24-bit, but there is also a 6-bit DSD conversion circuit. And that's all about DAC specs. If you want more of that, just visit a manufacturer's website and everything is listed nicely, and all of the new things, tech specs like precision of the resistors used, which is 0.01 by the way. Okay, no more tech spec. Let's move to how it really sounds. What struck me first with RS-15 is how high resolution it actually is. And this surprised me the most because if you remember RS2 and various reviews of that DAC, and my own in the end when I decided to not use it anymore, it was not truly and really that high resolution sounding DAC. But 15 here is a very different beast. Detail retrieval and tiny details, quick transients, the smallest high frequency detailing from the recording is super clean, crisp and precise. And I was immediately like, wow, they really improved. This is not just let's change name and add few features and maybe improve the sound a little bit. No, this is like noticeably higher resolution and just detail retrieval. And it goes from bottom of the bass to the highest frequencies. Tone clarity, like edges and outlining, is great. tone texture, inner tone texture, crispiness and huskiness of tones is also great. That's very revealing too. And that's actually a strong suit of most good R2R DACs. That aspect of the sound feels like very big improvement over the Aris 2. Then moving to tonality, that's actually quite similar to Aris 2. And that DAC was soft and like nice, natural sounding, but it did have brightish tonal character, like upper, mid-range and highs were kinda bright and very present in the tonal mix. And it's the same with Aris 15. It has very open and bright upper frequencies, and they're not unnatural or too forward or glowing in your face, because R2Rs usually don't do that. They have a way of, even when they sound bright and open, to be like toned down and more cultured about it than some Delta Sigma DACs that are bright, open and attacking you. And talking about that brightness, high frequency extension is great. I can really hear highest frequencies being clean, crisp and going really high, giving that good zing to tones, that glassy and glossy feeling to tones. And that is especially true for oversampling modes. If you go to NOS mode, the highs are slightly softer and slightly tamer, and mid-range is a bit more prominent and just overall speaking warmth of the sound. And it's actually very nice to have both of these, so you can choose a different flavoring of the sound. And with Aris 15, most of the times, with most of the music that I prefer to listen to personally, I actually preferred NOS, which is not often the case. I'm the guy that often uses OS modes on R2R DACs because they bring me a bit more clarity, a bit more edge clarity and high frequency extension, but all of that is so good with Aris 15 already, and extension is also so great already, and there's that bright tonal character that I actually preferred slightly softer, more mid-rangey NOS sound. But you should always try that for yourself, because it will depend on your personal preference and on the rest of your system, on pairing and matching. And while at tonality, I forgot to mention the bass line. The bass line is deep, it has solid, punchy feel to it, and it definitely feels that it digs deeper than Aris 2 did. Aris 2 did have like big but kinda soft bass. Aris 15 digs deeper, it has more physical punch, you feel a bass punch more, but it's also more controlled. It's not as fuzzy and as warm and bloated as the bass line of Aris 2 was. But don't get me wrong, it's definitely not lean either, and generally speaking, it's still more on a fuller, warmer side of things, the bass line itself, which actually gives an interesting tonal mix of thick, heavyweight notes, but also very open and kind of bright detailing and textures and crunchy, husky detailing over those notes. And one last thing that I haven't mentioned yet is sound staging. Well, Aris 15 has a pretty great sound stage. It's sort of laid back behind your speakers. It's spacious, it's wide, it's deep, and there's good clarity, good separation between different tones. That's definitely better, once again, than Aris 2 could do. Because while Aris 2 had really big, deep soundstage itself too, it sounded bigger and fuzzier and hazier, pinpointing was not as good. Like separation between instruments was not as clear, it was muddier sounding. And there's none of that happening with RS-15. But let's see how it actually compares to some of the best DACs nowadays. And I'll start with something that is actually more affordable and much smaller, like Chord Mojo 2. And this is one also really natural sounding DAC. It has warmer sound. It also has very rich tone timbre, the way that RS-15 has, and that crunchy, husky textures, harmonic richness of tones. So vocals, for example, sound great, and wind instruments sound great, and both of these DACs share that. But Mojo 2 is warmer sounding. Its mid-bass and bass are warmer, and also not as deep and not as authoritative as RS-15. And throughout the mid-range, RS-15 sounds a bit leaner and brighter, but also more precise, more crisp than Mojo 2. And in the highest frequencies, RS-15 feels more extended. It has more of that glossy and glassy zing that some tones really do possess in real life, like knocking a glass with a metal spoon. That's that glassy tone. RS-15 does that better than Mojo 2, which is slightly more matte sounding. So basically, while both of these have beautiful mid-range and rich tone timbre, Mojo 2 sounds warmer and slightly less dynamic, and extension on both ends, both highs and really deep bass, is not as good on Mojo 2. That's more authoritative, more extended, and also dynamics is slightly better with RS-15. Now, if you ask me to compare it to SMSL SU-10, SU-10 is so similar to Chord Mojo 2 that it would be just repeating 95% of the things. It's warm sounding, pleasant sounding, it doesn't dig as deep in the bass line, and notes don't feel as physical with SU-10, but the mid-range is slightly warmer, a touch hazier, and the highest frequencies, while airy and nice, are not as extended and as crisp as they are with RS-15. Which actually brings me to my last comparison and the heavyweight champion below $2,000, Gustard R26. And Gustard R26 is some $450 more expensive. It's also R2R, but it does have quite a different sound signature. For once, Gustard R26 sounds juicier, warmer, more mid-bassy, also warmer throughout the mid-range, and it has bigger soundstage. But also it is softer around the edges, it feels a bit slower and not as crisp as RS-15. R26 does sound bigger. Its notes also sound bigger individually in the soundstage, but they are less defined and less crisp. R26 cannot match that inner tone texture. For example, wind instruments don't sound as raspy as they do with RS-15. And in reality, like if you imagine some brass instruments like trumpets or saxophones, they do have both smoothness but also that inner raspiness, and that's better revealed with RS-15. R26 smooths over those textures. Instruments do sound bigger, but they're warmer and like a bit more bloated and not as revealing, both of that inner tone textures, but also quick transients, like quick string work on acoustic guitar. It will sound more crisp and each tone will be better separated from each other on RS-15 than it will be on a slightly warmer, a bit more bloated, slower R26. So it's a choice between something that sounds bigger, warmer, and less defined, and something that is, generally speaking, crisper, slightly more revealing, but also brighter sounding, colder to a degree, and not as huge in terms of spaciousness. And I consider them to be on the same level, but very different in nature. In some systems, and to some of you, maybe R26 will appeal more if you have bright, maybe slightly edgy systems. On the other hand, if you have neutral to warmer sounding systems, RS-15 with its more revealing sound, more technically precise sound, might sound better to your ears and with the rest of your system. A thing to notice though is that RS-15 is the more affordable one. $450 difference is not a small difference. So if you don't need that volume control and audio renderer that R26 has, but just standalone DAC with fixed volume, RS-15 may actually be a better value. And this brings me to the conclusion. RS-15 is significantly improved DAC compared to RS-2. It's much cleaner, crisper, and it just retrieves much more details. Price did hike, but if we actually consider the inflation that happened between the time when RS-2 was launched and when RS-15 was launched, I think it's actually much more fair to say that price didn't really increase, but it just followed the inflation. It just followed that fact that our money lost some of its value. Just in my country, for example, here in Serbia, just like a normal candy bar, like Snickers, costs 2 times the price it had back in the day when RS-2 was released. I don't know about you, but I always calculate my inflation through candy bars, which means that RS-15 is really not that much more expensive than RS-2 was. By the way, Denafrips does make even more affordable DAC nowadays. It's called Enyo. It's below $1,000, but I haven't tried that one. But judging by RS-15 and the improvement it's made, I would bet that even Enyo would defeat RS-2 in a direct comparison. But that's another topic. For today, I wanted to say that RS-15 is a really, really good evolution of RS-2. It has most of the great qualities that you would expect from a good R2R DACs, but barely any of the faults of those older, slightly muddier sounding R2R designs. And if you think that the tonality of RS-15 would match your taste and your system, this one should be in your consideration list. That was all for today. See you next time.